Victoria Sterling wiped the flour from her hands as she watched the morning sun filter through the windows of Sweet Dreams Bakery. The small shop had been her family's heart and soul for 3 generations, but now it felt more like a burden than a blessing. The rent notices piled high on her desk, and the equipment desperately needed repairs she couldn't afford. Her younger sister Lily burst through the back door, violin case slung over her shoulder, and eyes sparkling with excitement. "Victoria, you'll never guess what happened at my audition yesterday," Lily said, practically bouncing on her toes. Victoria smiled despite her worries. At 19, Lily possessed a musical talent that could take her anywhere in the world, but the prestigious music conservatory required tuition fees that seemed impossible to reach. "Tell me everything," Victoria said, setting down her mixing bowl. "The director said I have exceptional potential, but—" Lily's face fell slightly. "The scholarship covers only half the tuition. We need $15,000 by next month." Victoria's heart sank. Between the bakery's mounting debts and now this opportunity for Lily, she felt completely overwhelmed. She had always been the responsible one, taking care of everyone since their parents died in a car accident 5 years ago. The world above the clouds, 40 floors above Manhattan, Sebastian Hayes stood in his corner office, staring out at the city that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in America. His tech company, Hayes Innovations, had revolutionized artificial intelligence, but success came with a price he never expected to pay. Thomas Chen, his personal assistant and closest friend, entered with a tablet full of urgent messages. "Your stepmother called another board meeting for tomorrow," Thomas said carefully. "She's pushing harder for the CEO transition clause in your father's will." Sebastian's jaw tightened. Rebecca Hayes had married his father when Sebastian was just 16. She had spent every day since trying to manipulate her way into controlling the company. According to his father's will, if Sebastian remained unmarried by his 30th birthday next month, Rebecca would gain controlling interest in Hayes Innovations. "She thinks I'm too unstable to lead the company because I haven't settled down," Sebastian muttered, as if marriage determines business capability. "What about the women I've arranged meetings with?" Thomas suggested. "Several would be suitable for a business arrangement." Sebastian shook his head. Every woman from his social circle came with complications, hidden agendas, or connections to Rebecca. He needed someone completely outside his world, someone who couldn't be bought or manipulated by his stepmother. Unexpected encounter that afternoon, Sebastian decided to walk instead of taking his usual car service. The stress of the board meeting had left him restless. He found himself wandering through Queens, far from his usual Manhattan haunts. The sweet smell of fresh bread drew him to a small corner bakery. Through the window, he saw a woman with chestnut hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, carefully decorating a wedding cake. Her movements were precise and graceful, and there was something peaceful about the way she worked. Sebastian pushed open the door, causing a small bell to chime. Victoria looked up, surprised to see such an elegantly dressed man in her humble shop. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but his eyes seemed tired and troubled. "Can I help you?" Victoria asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "I was just walking by and smelled something incredible," Sebastian said, genuinely intrigued by the cozy atmosphere so different from his sterile corporate world. "Everything here is made fresh daily," Victoria said with pride. "Would you like to try our signature chocolate croissant?" As she handed him the pastry, their fingers briefly touched, and both felt an unexpected spark. Sebastian bit into the croissant and closed his eyes in appreciation. "This is extraordinary," he said sincerely. "You made this." Victoria blushed slightly. "It's my grandmother's recipe. She started this bakery 60 years ago." For the next hour they talked easily about everything except Sebastian's real identity. He learned about her struggles to keep the bakery running, her dreams for Lily's future, and her simple philosophy that food made with love could heal almost anything. Victoria saw past his expensive clothes to the loneliness in his eyes. Didn't know who he was, but she recognized someone carrying heavy burdens. The desperate proposal that evening, Sebastian couldn't stop thinking about Victoria. She represented everything genuine that was missing from his world. When Thomas mentioned another potential fake bride candidate, Sebastian suddenly knew what he had to do. Find out everything about Victoria Sterling, Sebastian instructed, but be discreet. I don't want her to know who I am yet, sir. She runs a struggling bakery in Queens. She has significant debt and a sister in music school. What exactly are you thinking? I'm thinking she might be perfect. The next morning, Sebastian returned to the bakery, but this time as himself. He wore simple jeans and a sweater, hoping to blend in better. He came back, Victoria said. Surprised, but pleased to see him again. I couldn't stop thinking about that croissant, Sebastian lied smoothly. And I have a business proposition that might interest you. Victoria raised an eyebrow as she continued kneading dough. I'm listening. Sebastian took a deep breath. This was either brilliant or completely insane. I need someone to pretend to be my wife for 1 month, he said directly. It's a business arrangement, completely professional. In return, I'll pay you $50,000. Victoria nearly dropped her dough. Excuse me, I know it sounds crazy, Sebastian continued quickly. But I'm involved in some complex business dealings where having a wife would be advantageous. You would need to attend a few social events, meet some business associates, nothing inappropriate. Just act like we're happily married. You don't even know me, Victoria said, bewildered. Why would you trust a stranger with something so important? Sebastian looked into her honest eyes. Because you're real. It's every other woman in my social circle has an agenda. You just want to bake amazing pastries and take care of your sister. That's exactly what I need. A life-changing decision? Victoria stared at this mysterious man who had just offered to solve all her financial problems with one impossible request. $50,000 would save the bakery, pay for Lily's tuition, and give them both a fresh start. This is completely insane, Victoria said slowly. I know, Sebastian agreed. But sometimes insane is exactly what the situation calls for. What would I have to do exactly? Attend business dinners, charity galas, maybe a few weekend events. We would need to appear affectionate, but nothing inappropriate. After 1 month, we get divorced quietly, and you never have to see me again. Victoria thought about Lily's dreams, about the bakery her grandmother had built with love, about all the opportunities that $50,000 could create. I have conditions, she said finally. First, I need to know your real name and what kind of business you're in. Second, nothing happens that I'm not comfortable with. Third, my sister can never know the truth. Sebastian smiled for the first time in weeks. My name is Sebastian Hayes. I run a technology company called Hayes Innovations, and I agree to all your conditions. Victoria nearly fainted. Even she knew who Sebastian Hayes was. His face had been on magazine covers and news programs for years. You're Sebastian Hayes, she whispered. The billionaire tech guy. Guilty as charged, Sebastian said sheepishly. Does that change your answer? Victoria looked around her struggling bakery, thought about Lily's musical dreams, and realized that sometimes life offered unexpected opportunities that required tremendous courage to accept. When do we start? Victoria asked, her voice steady. Despite her racing heart, the contract sealed. Sebastian pulled out his phone and called Thomas. Within an hour, a legal contract was drafted, reviewed, and signed in the back room of Sweet Dreams Bakery. The surreal nature of the situation wasn't lost on either of them. There's one more thing, Sebastian said as they finished signing papers. We'll need to have a believable story about how we met and fell in love. The media and my business associates will want details. We can say we met when you came into my bakery, Victoria suggested. Love at first bite of chocolate croissant. Sebastian laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. Perfect. Simple and close to the truth. As he prepared to leave, Sebastian paused at the door. Victoria, I want you to know that this arrangement will be completely professional. You don't have to worry about any inappropriate expectations. Thank you, Victoria said, grateful for his reassurance. When do I meet the rest of your world? Tomorrow night, there's a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. Consider it your debut as Mrs. Sebastian Hayes. After he left, Victoria sat in her empty bakery, trying to process what had just happened. In 24 hours, she would transform. From a struggling baker into the wife of one of America's most eligible bachelors. She had no idea that Sebastian's stepmother, Rebecca, was already planning her next move to destroy this unexpected marriage before it could threaten her own ambitions. The game was about to begin, and Victoria had just become the most important piece on the board without even realizing it. The next morning, Victoria stood before her closet, realizing she owned nothing suitable for a charity gala. Her entire wardrobe consisted of work clothes and casual outfits. Panic began to set in until Thomas Chen arrived with a team of stylists carrying garment bags and makeup cases. "Mr. Hayes thought you might need some assistance preparing for tonight," Thomas explained professionally. "These ladies will help you with everything." As the stylists worked their magic, Victoria caught glimpses of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the elegant woman looking back. The deep blue gown complemented her skin tone perfectly, and her hair had been styled into sophisticated waves. "You look beautiful," Thomas said sincerely, when the transformation was complete. "Mr. Hayes is very fortunate." Victoria blushed, reminding herself this was all pretend. But as she looked at her reflection, she couldn't help wondering what it would be like to truly belong in Sebastian's world. Not just as a hired actress playing a role, little did she know that Sebastian was having similar thoughts as he prepared for the evening that would change both their lives forever. The Metropolitan Museum of Art sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the soft murmur of New York's elite. Victoria stepped out of Sebastian's private car, her heart pounding as photographers' cameras flashed like lightning around them. The deep blue gown felt like armor, beautiful but unfamiliar. Sebastian offered his arm with a reassuring smile. "Remember, you're amazing just as you are," he whispered in her ear. "Don't try to be anyone else." The moment they entered the gala, Victoria felt every eye in the room turn toward them. Whispers followed in their wake like ripples in water. Sebastian Hayes had been Manhattan's most eligible bachelor for years, and his sudden appearance with an unknown woman sent shockwaves through the social circles. "Sebastian, darling," a woman with perfectly styled silver hair glided toward them. Her smile was warm, but Victoria noticed how her eyes remained cold and calculating. "I'm just introduce me to your lovely companion." Rebecca Sebastian's voice became noticeably cooler. "This is Victoria Sterling, my wife." "Victoria." "This is Rebecca Hayes, my stepmother." Rebecca's smile faltered for just a moment before returning with forced brightness. "Wife, how wonderfully unexpected. And where exactly did you two meet?" Victoria felt Sebastian tense beside her, but she responded with natural warmth. "At my bakery in Queens." "Sebastian has quite the sweet tooth." "Bakery," Rebecca repeated, as if Victoria had said she worked on Mars. "How charming. And have you always been in the food service industry?" The condescension in Rebecca's voice was barely concealed, but Victoria refused to be intimidated. "For 3 generations, actually. My grandmother started Sweet Dreams Bakery in 1962. We've been serving the community ever since." "How admirable," Rebecca said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sebastian always did have a soft spot for charity cases. Sebastian stepped forward, his voice dangerously quiet. "That's enough, Rebecca." But Victoria placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's fine," she said calmly. "I'm proud of my work. There's something beautiful about creating food that brings families together and celebrates life's special moments." Rebecca's perfect composure cracked slightly. She hadn't expected Victoria to respond with such grace and confidence. Learning to dance in high society. As the evening progressed, Victoria found herself swept into conversations with diplomats, celebrities, and business moguls. Each interaction felt like walking through a minefield. But Sebastian stayed close, offering subtle guidance and support. At dinner, she was seated next to Margaret Chen, Thomas's mother, and a prominent art collector. Unlike the others, Margaret seemed genuinely interested in Victoria as a person. "Tell me about your bakery," Margaret said warmly. "I have such fond memories of neighborhood bakeries from my childhood." Victoria's face lit up as she described her work, the joy of perfecting recipes, and the satisfaction of making customers smile. As she spoke, she noticed other guests at their table leaning in to listen, genuinely intrigued by her passion. "You know," said James Mitchell, a renowned restaurateur, "authenticity is becoming increasingly rare in the food industry. Your approach sounds refreshing." Sebastian watched Victoria throughout the evening, amazed by her natural ability to connect with people. She didn't try to impress anyone or pretend to be something she wasn't, yet she commanded respect simply. By being genuine, when the orchestra began playing, Sebastian extended his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Hayes?" On the dance floor, surrounded by New York's elite, Victoria felt surprisingly at ease in Sebastian's arms. They moved together, naturally, as if they had been dancing together for years. "You're incredible," Sebastian murmured as they swayed to the music. "Look around. You've charmed half the room just by being yourself." Victoria glanced around and realized he was right. People were watching them with genuine warmth and curiosity, not the cold calculation she had feared. "I was terrified I would embarrass you," she admitted. "Never," Sebastian said firmly. "You're the most real person in this entire room." Behind closed doors after the gala, Sebastian invited Victoria back to his penthouse to debrief the evening. The apartment was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city, but Victoria noticed it felt more like a showroom than a home. "You did amazingly tonight," Sebastian said, loosening his tie as they settled in. His living room. "Rebecca looked like she had swallowed a lemon when you won over the Mitchell table." Victoria laughed, kicking off her heels and curling up in the oversized leather chair. "She really doesn't like me, does she?" "She doesn't like anyone who threatens her plans," Sebastian explained. "Rebecca married my father when his company was worth millions. Now it's worth billions, and she spent years positioning herself. To inherit everything? What was your father like?" Victoria asked gently, seeing the sadness that crossed Sebastian's features. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. "Brilliant, driven, but also lonely. He threw himself into work after my mother died when I was 8. I think marrying Rebecca was his attempt to create a normal family for me, but she was never interested in being a mother." Victoria's heart ached for the lonely boy Sebastian must have been. "Is that why you're so determined to keep the company?" "His legacy," Sebastian said simply. "Everything he built, everything he dreamed of. I can't let Rebecca turn it into just another corporate acquisition." They talked until nearly dawn, sharing stories about their vastly different childhoods. Sebastian told her about private schools and corporate boardrooms, while Victoria described community potlucks and helping her grandmother knead bread before school. Growing closer over the next 2 weeks, Victoria and Sebastian fell into a comfortable routine. She would spend mornings at the bakery, while he handled business at Hayes Innovations. Afternoons were reserved for couple activities. Learning about each other's worlds, Sebastian surprised Victoria by showing genuine interest in her work. He rolled up his sleeves and tried his hand at decorating cookies, though his attempts looked more like abstract art than flowers. "You make it look so easy," he said, frustrated as his icing flower resembled a blob. "You're trying too hard," Victoria laughed, guiding his hands. "Baking is about feeling, not thinking. Let the creativity flow naturally." Their hands touched as she helped him pipe the icing, and both felt that same electric spark from their first meeting. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. In return, Sebastian showed Victoria his world of technology and innovation. He took her through his laboratories, explaining his company's work in artificial intelligence and sustainable technology. "We're developing AI systems that can help predict and prevent environmental disasters," Sebastian explained, his passion evident in every word. "Imagine being able to warn communities about floods or fires days in advance." Victoria watched him speak, seeing the same dedication in his eyes that she felt when creating the perfect wedding cake. Despite their different backgrounds, they shared a common desire to make the world better. The first crack their growing closeness didn't go unnoticed by Rebecca, who began implementing more aggressive tactics. She hired private investigators to dig into Victoria's background, looking for any scandal or weakness she could exploit. She also began spreading subtle rumors in social circles, suggesting that Victoria was a gold digger who had trapped Sebastian. With a surprise pregnancy or blackmail? The whispers were vicious and persistent. Victoria first became aware of the rumors when she overheard 2 women talking at a charity luncheon. "I heard she was pregnant and threatened to go to the media," one woman said in a loud whisper. "My sources say she has gambling debts and Sebastian is paying them off," replied the other. Victoria felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. She excused herself and locked herself in the bathroom, trying to compose herself before facing the crowd. Again, when she returned home that evening, Sebastian immediately noticed her distress. "What happened?" he asked, concerned. Victoria told him about the rumors, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maybe this was a mistake. I don't belong in your world, Sebastian. These people see right through me." Sebastian's jaw clenched with anger. "Rebecca," he said grimly. "This has her fingerprints all over it." "Maybe she's right," Victoria said quietly. "Maybe I'm just a charity case who got in over her head." Sebastian took her hands in his. "Look at me, Victoria. You are not a charity case. You're intelligent, talented, and kind. You've accomplished more with your bakery than most of these people have with all their inherited wealth." A moment of truth that night, as they attended a business dinner with potential Japanese investors, Victoria felt the weight of every stare and whisper. She tried to maintain her composure, but the constant scrutiny was wearing her down. During dinner, one of the investors made a comment in Japanese that caused the translator to look uncomfortable. "What did he say?" Sebastian asked. The translator hesitated. "He said she seems like a nice girl, but questioned whether she understands the complexities of international business." Victoria surprised everyone by responding in fluent Japanese. Having studied the language in college, she spoke directly to the investor, explaining her philosophy that business, like baking, required patience, attention to detail, and respect for tradition while embracing innovation. The investor was visibly impressed and spent the rest of the evening asking Victoria about her business strategies and cultural perspectives. By the end of the night, he had committed to a major partnership with Hayes Innovations. In the car afterward, Sebastian stared at Victoria in amazement. "You speak Japanese?" "I minored in international languages," Victoria said modestly. "I always thought it would help if I wanted to expand the bakery internationally someday." Sebastian shook his head in wonder. "Every day you surprise me more. Do you realize what you just did tonight? That partnership will create thousands of jobs and advance sustainable technology by years." Victoria blushed. "I just treated him with respect and spoke from the heart. That's exactly what made the difference," Sebastian said softly, hearts unguarded later that night. They sat on Sebastian's terrace, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the city lights twinkle below. The pretense of their arrangement seemed to fade away in the quiet intimacy of the moment. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said softly. "Anything. Do you ever regret not having a real marriage? Real love?" Sebastian was quiet for a long time. "I thought I did once, with someone in college, but looking back, I think I was more in love with the idea of love than with her. She couldn't handle the pressure of my world, and I couldn't give up my responsibilities for hers. And since then, I've convinced myself that love was a luxury I couldn't afford. Too risky, too complicated." He turned to look at her. "What about you? Why hasn't someone amazing already married you?" Victoria smiled sadly. "Hard to date when you're working 16-hour days to keep a business afloat. And most men were intimidated by a woman who could support herself. Wanted someone who needed them, not someone who chose to be with them." "Their loss," Sebastian said quietly. They sat in comfortable silence, both aware that their fake marriage was beginning to feel surprisingly real. Neither was ready to acknowledge the growing feelings between them, but both felt the shift happening. Victoria looked out at the glittering city below, thinking about how much her life had changed in just a few weeks. She was falling for Sebastian Hayes. That was definitely not part of their contract. Sebastian watched Victoria's profile in the moonlight, realizing that somewhere between the charity galas and late-night conversations, his carefully guarded heart had opened to this remarkable woman. The fake marriage was becoming the most real thing in his life, but both knew that in just 2 more weeks, their month-long arrangement would end, and they would return to their separate worlds. The question neither was brave enough to ask was whether they wanted it to end at all. Rebecca Hayes was asking herself the same question from her own penthouse across town, and her answer was a definitive yes. She had found the weapon she needed to destroy Victoria Sterling and reclaim control of Hayes Innovations. Tomorrow, she would begin her final assault on Sebastian's marriage and his empire. Victoria woke up to her phone buzzing frantically beside her bed. Dozens of missed calls from Thomas, Sebastian, and even Lily filled her screen. Her heart raced as she opened her news app, and the headline made her blood run cold. Fake wife scandal. Tech billionaire Sebastian Hayes caught in marriage hoax. With Queen's Baker, the article was devastating and detailed. Photos of their contract signing, bank records showing the $50,000 payment, and quotes from anonymous sources describing their arrangement as a desperate publicity stunt filled the screen. Rebecca had unleashed everything. Victoria's hands trembled as she read further. The article painted her as a manipulative gold digger who had seduced Sebastian for money, while portraying him as a naive businessman who had been taken advantage of by a scheming woman from the wrong side of town. Her phone rang, and Sebastian's name appeared on the screen. "Victoria, don't believe anything you read." His voice was strained and urgent. "I'm coming to get you right now. We need to get ahead of this." "Sebastian, it's over," Victoria said quietly, her voice breaking. "Your stepmother won. She's destroyed." "Both of us know she hasn't. We can fight this together." But Victoria had already made her decision. "I'm leaving the city, Sebastian. I'm going back to my real life, where I belong." This was always temporary, remember? Before Sebastian could respond, Victoria hung up and turned off her phone. She packed quickly, tears streaming down her face as she folded the beautiful clothes that had transformed her into someone she was never meant to be. The corporate battlefield, meanwhile, Rebecca Hayes called an emergency board meeting at Hayes Innovations. The conference room filled with board members who had watched the scandal unfold on their morning news feeds. "Gentlemen," Rebecca began, her voice dripping with false concern, "I think we can all agree that Sebastian's judgment has been severely compromised. This marriage hoax demonstrates exactly the kind of instability we cannot afford in a CEO." Sebastian burst into the room, his usually perfect appearance disheveled from a sleepless night spent trying to reach Victoria. "This meeting is premature," Sebastian announced, taking his seat at the head of the table. "I can explain everything." "Oh, Sebastian," Rebecca said with mock sympathy, "there's nothing to explain. The evidence is clear. You paid a stranger to pretend to be your wife to secure your position as CEO. This violates every principle of corporate ethics." Robert Wilson, Sebastian's father's oldest friend, spoke up. "Sebastian, we've known you since you were a boy. I want to hear your side." Sebastian looked around the room at faces he had known for years, people who had watched him grow up and build the company alongside his father. The truth felt both liberating and terrifying. "I hired Victoria Sterling to pose as my wife," Sebastian admitted, "but not for publicity or corporate manipulation. I did it because Rebecca has been systematically trying to undermine my leadership and steal control of my father's company." Rebecca's eyes flashed dangerously. "That's a serious accusation, Sebastian." "It's the truth," Sebastian continued. "For 2 years, you've been spreading doubt about my stability, my commitment, my ability to lead. You've manipulated board members, planted stories in the media, and done everything possible to force me out so you could take over." Even if that were true, board member Patricia Lanes interjected, "Hiring a fake wife is hardly the mature response we'd expect from our CEO." Sebastian felt his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "You're right. It was desperate and foolish. But in the process, I discovered something unexpected. Victoria Sterling is the most genuine, intelligent, and capable woman I've ever met. What started as a business arrangement became real love." The room erupted in murmurs and shocked expressions. Rebecca smiled triumphantly. "Love," Rebecca laughed. Coldly, "Sebastian, you paid her. How can you possibly know if her feelings were real?" The question hit Sebastian like a physical blow because it was the same doubt that had been gnawing at him. Had Victoria's growing affection been genuine, or had she simply been playing her role perfectly? The truth about Rebecca Thomas Chen chose that moment to enter the conference room, carrying a thick file folder. His usually calm demeanor was replaced by barely contained anger. "I apologize for interrupting," Thomas said formally, "but I have information that's relevant to this discussion." Rebecca's confident expression faltered slightly. "Thomas, this is a private board meeting. About corporate ethics and leadership, Thomas replied coolly, which is exactly what this concerns. He opened the folder and began distributing documents to each board member. For the past 6 months, I've been investigating unusual financial transactions and communications within our company. What I discovered is a systematic campaign by Rebecca Hayes to undermine Sebastian's leadership and position herself to take control of Hayes Innovations. The board members examined the documents with growing alarm. Bank records showed payments to private investigators, journalists, and social media influencers. Email chains revealed Rebecca's coordination with rival companies to spread negative stories about Sebastian's leadership. This is preposterous, Rebecca said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. Thomas continued calmly. Rebecca has been feeding information to our competitors, manipulating stock prices through planted media stories, attempting to bribe board members to vote against Sebastian's initiatives. Robert Wilson looked up from the documents, his face grim. Rebecca, these emails have your signature. Are you denying you wrote them? Rebecca's perfect composure finally cracked. Everything I did was for the good of this company. Sebastian is too young, too impulsive. The fake marriage proves my point exactly. Actually, Thomas said, producing another document, it proves something else entirely. Sebastian's leadership has increased company value by 40% in 2 years. Our employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and we've secured more sustainable technology partnerships than any competitor. Patricia Lane studied the financial reports. Thomas is right. The numbers don't lie. Sebastian's personal life aside, his business leadership has been exceptional. Rebecca realized she was losing control of the narrative. He's been distracted by this ridiculous romance. A CEO cannot afford such emotional complications. On the contrary, Robert Wilson said thoughtfully. Some of our most successful partnerships this month came directly from connections Victoria made at social events. The Japanese investors, the Mitchell Restaurant Group, the Chen Art Foundation. They all cited her authenticity and intelligence as factors in their decisions to work with us. Sebastian listened in amazement as the board discussed Victoria's positive impact on his business relationships. He had been so focused on protecting her from his world that he hadn't realized how much she had contributed to his success. Finding Victoria. After the board voted unanimously to remove Rebecca from all company positions and launch a formal investigation into her activities, Sebastian had only one priority: finding Victoria. He drove to Sweet Dreams Bakery, but it was closed with a sign saying family emergency. Mrs. Patterson from next door told him that Victoria and Lily had left for their aunt's house upstate. She didn't know where. Thomas found him sitting in his car outside the bakery, staring at the darkened windows. Sir, I may be able to help, Thomas said gently. I have the contact information for Victoria's emergency references from our background check. Within hours, they had tracked down Victoria's Aunt Carol in a small town in the Catskills. The 3-hour drive gave Sebastian time to think about everything he wanted to say. Everything he should have said before the world exploded around them. A cottage in the mountains, Victoria sat on her aunt's front porch, mechanically snapping green beans while her mind replayed the past month. The peaceful mountain setting felt like another planet compared to Manhattan's chaos. Lily emerged from the house, violin in hand. You can't hide up here forever, she said, settling beside her sister. I'm not hiding. I'm regaining perspective. By running away from the man you're in love with? Victoria's hands stilled. It was never real, Lily. It was just a contract. Maybe it started that way, Lily said gently. But I saw how you looked at him. And I saw how he looked at you. It wasn't acting. Before Victoria could respond, the sound of a car approaching made them both look up. Sebastian's luxury sedan looked completely out of place on the rural mountain road. Victoria's heart raced as Sebastian stepped out of the car. His expensive suit replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. He looked tired but determined. Victoria, he called out, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. Please, just give me 5 minutes. There's nothing to say, Sebastian. The whole world knows the truth now. They know a version of the truth, Sebastian said, climbing the steps slowly. But they don't know the most important part. Lily quietly slipped inside, leaving them alone on the porch. What part is that? Victoria asked, her voice barely above. A whisper. Sebastian sat down beside her, careful to maintain some distance. That somewhere between the charity galas and late-night conversations, I fell completely in love with you. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. How can you know that? How can either of us know what was real? Because of how I felt when I thought I'd lost you, Sebastian said simply. Because of how empty my world became the moment you left. Because every success feels meaningless if I can't share it with you. The real proposal, Sebastian pulled out a small velvet box, and Victoria's breath caught. This isn't about contracts or business arrangements, Sebastian said, opening the box to reveal a simple but stunning diamond ring. This is about the fact that you make me want to be a better man. You see possibilities I never imagined and believe in dreams I'd forgotten I had. Victoria stared at the ring, her heart pounding. You showed me that authenticity is more powerful than any corporate strategy, Sebastian continued. Walked into my world and made it better just by being yourself. You challenged my assumptions, supported my dreams, and somehow managed to fall in love with the man behind the CEO title. Sebastian, Victoria whispered. I know I messed everything up. With the contract, I know I hurt you by not being honest about my feelings sooner, but I also know that what we have is real. It's the most real thing in my life. Got down on one knee, and Victoria felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. Victoria. Sterling, will you marry me? Not for business or appearances or anyone else's expectations. Just because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me? Victoria looked into Sebastian's eyes and saw nothing but sincere love and hope. All the doubts, all the hurt, all the confusion of the past. Few days seemed to fade away. The media will have a field day, she said softly. Let them. I don't care about anyone's opinion except yours. Your world is so different from mine, and we'll create a new world together. One that includes both bakeries and boardrooms. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face as she nodded. Yes, Sebastian. Yes, I'll marry you. A new beginning 6 months later, Sweet Dreams Bakery had expanded into a thriving business with an online presence and partnerships with high-end restaurants throughout New York. Victoria had kept her promise to herself about maintaining her independence while allowing Sebastian to support her dreams. Their wedding was a perfect blend of both their worlds. The ceremony took place in the garden behind the original bakery, with flowers Victoria had grown herself and a cake she had baked using her grandmother's recipes. The guest list included both Manhattan's elite and the neighbors from Queens who had supported Victoria for years. Lily played violin as Victoria walked down the aisle. Not in an expensive designer gown, but in a simple dress made by a local seamstress, carrying sunflowers from her own garden. As Sebastian watched his bride approach, he reflected on how much his life had changed. He was still CEO of Hayes Innovations. But now his success was measured not just in profits, but in the positive impact his company had on communities like Victoria's Rebecca Hayes watched the wedding coverage from her new apartment in Florida, where she had moved after being permanently banned from Hayes Innovations and Manhattan social circles. The investigation into her activities had revealed years of corporate espionage and fraud, ending her dreams of controlling the Hayes empire. Love's true victory. During their reception, Victoria and Sebastian snuck away for a quiet moment alone. They stood in the same spot where they had first met, now decorated with fairy lights and surrounded by the laughter of their friends and cells. Family, do you ever regret how we started? Victoria asked, adjusting Sebastian's tie with the same gentle touch she used when decorating cakes. Never, Sebastian said firmly. That contract brought you into my life. Everything else was just the universe's way of making sure we didn't waste the gift we'd been given. Victoria smiled, remembering the scared woman who had signed that contract what felt like a lifetime ago. I thought I was just solving financial problems. We're solving much bigger problems than you realized, Sebastian said, pulling her close. You saved my company, but more importantly, you saved me. As they danced to Lily's violin music under the stars, surrounded by the scent of fresh bread and blooming flowers, Victoria and Sebastian knew they had found something more valuable than any corporate empire, a love built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and the courage to be authentically themselves. The bakery's success continued to grow, eventually becoming a symbol of how small businesses could thrive with the right support and vision. Sebastian's company pioneered new sustainable technologies, often inspired by Victoria's philosophy of nurturing growth and creating beauty in the world. Their story became legendary in both Manhattan boardrooms and Brooklyn neighborhoods. Proof that love could bridge any gap when two people were brave enough to be completely honest with each other. Years later, when reporters asked about their unconventional beginning, Victoria would smile and say, "Sometimes the best contracts are the ones that get completely rewritten by the heart." Sebastian would add, "The smartest business decision I ever made was falling in love with my fake wife." Their love story proved that authenticity could triumph over manipulation, that genuine connection could overcome social barriers, and that sometimes the most unexpected partnerships create the most beautiful results. The contract that had brought them together was eventually framed and hung in their home, not as a reminder of deception, but as proof that love can grow anywhere, even in the most unlikely circumstances. Victoria Sterling Hayes had started as a struggling baker who agreed to a desperate arrangement. She became the heart of an empire, the love of a lifetime, living proof that being true to yourself is the greatest success of all.